Okay, thank you very much, everyone. This is the June 6th, 2022 meeting of the Yolo County Transportation District Board of Directors, and I'll call the meeting to order. We are continuing to have the option for individuals to meet in a hybrid remote session, and that's looks like everyone has chosen to do that, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll call the meeting to order, and we will have opportunities for public comment that are found in the agenda. So if you go ahead and take a look at that, if you're a member of the public and you'd like to share with us, we'll have opportunity for folks to comment on items not on the agenda, and then on those matters that we take up as topics for review this evening, we'll have another opportunity for people to speak to us. I think we're ready to begin, and can we go ahead and call the quorum?
Okay. Yolo County,
Here.
City of Woodland,
Here.
City of Davis,
I am here.
City of West Sacramento. Absent. City of Winters,
Here.
UC Davis,
Here.
and Caltrans.
Here.
Okay, we have quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you. At this point, we'll open to members of the public having a chance to talk with us on topics of their interest or on matters that are on the consent calendar. We ask that you limit your comment to 2 minutes for us. And if hopefully you'll be able to do that. And then later on, we'll be talking about other topics. And at this point, we don't typically respond to items that are brought up in the public comment because they've not been posted. It's not legal, and it's also not fair to others who might have an interest. So with that, is there anyone in the room who would like to address us?
Yes, we do have one public comment.
Is that for someone in the room or someone on the video?
Someone on Zoom.
Okay, someone on Zoom. All right, no one in the room. And
No one
one
on
person on Zoom.
Okay.
So that is Mr. Hirsch. Would you like to address the YCTD board, please?
Go ahead,
Hello,
Mr. Burke.
Alan. Can you hear me?
Looks like he's muted.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah, we can
Thank
hear
you
you
very
now.
much, Delta. Yeah. There we go. I'm on screen here. Thank you very much. I'm very impressed with the progress the board has made in terms of also you're activating the Citizens Advisory Committee and engaging them. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and equity are very important issues. We've talked about equity in terms of participation in the discussion slides, but I want to talk about diversity. There's been a lot of discussion about diversity, and the Citizens Advisory Committee has talked about having diversity. And diversity is wonderful because it brings in different viewpoints into the room, enriches discussion, represents different standards and different ideas that otherwise represented. But I'm troubled by when the leaders of the citizens, the leader of the Citizens Advisory says we want to speak with one voice. There is an inherent, if you want diversity, that surfaces difference, that surfaces conflicts or difference in values. That the Citizens Advisory Committee chairman wants to only speak with one voice seems to be contra the idea of diversity. And I'm also hear from some of the older members of the Citizens Committee, they don't want to speak directly to you. Some of them think that their role is only to speak through staff and not represent directly to you the input from the community. I think you should clarify what you want from the Citizens Advisory Committee. You want a variety of ideas. You don't want one voice. You want different ideas. You don't want those differences silenced. That is what true diversity is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hirsch. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to address the board?
There are no further public comments.
I guess I would just say briefly that a strong voice from the Citizen Advisory Committee would be on a topic that they can find a consensus around. Certainly, any individual is free to talk to us about any topic, but I think that hearing and hearing if there's a diversity of opinion on some topic would be helpful, but a strong voice would be those that around a topic where they've reached consensus, and that would be pretty compelling. That's my editorial comment on that. The next item for us to consider is the consent agenda, item 3, A, B, C, and D. Is there anything you'd like to remove from the consent agenda, Autumn?
Nothing from me.
All right. Is there any member of the board who would like to remove an item for further discussion?
Can we see it on the screen?
What's that?
Can we see the agenda on the screen?
Oh, I would have guessed that that's probably true. Do you have a?
Yes, I can pull it.
I will move that we adopt the consent agenda items 3A through 3D, Mr. Chair.
All right. Is there a second?
I will second the motion.
Great. So we have a motion by Stallard and a second by Lauren to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Okay, Mimi, please call the roll.
Yolo County,
Aye.
City of Woodland,
Aye.
City of Davis,
Aye.
City of West Sacramento. Absent, City of Winters.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passed.
All right. Thank you, everyone. That brings us to item 4, administrative reports. Is there any member of the board have a report you'd like to share? I don't see anybody stepping forward. The ad hoc committee on the 80 managed lane report. Autumn, is there anything that we should share on that topic at this point?
There's not been a lot to discuss since the last meeting of the board. We are continuing to wait for a response from Caltrans with regard to the letter that we sent prior to the last board meeting, and nothing else to report at this time.
Mm-hmm. Very good. TransDev? Do you have anything to report to us this evening?
Yes, Tristan, thank you. I just wanted to update as far as where we're at. The previous, I haven't really added in our challenges that we've been faced with. We're not having a problem with getting applicants coming in, or I should say, putting applications in. It's more of, actually showing up. So just give you an idea, through the month of May alone, we had 8 declined. We had 8 that we hired. We still have 6 of those in training. The other 2 have, for some reason, have been out. We've had 26 that we left messages for that never got a call back. And then we've had 14 of the that we've set up for interviews never even showed up. So we had them on the schedule and they just never showed up, never got a call back. We've actually followed up with a majority of them as well, and they just won't answer the call. So like I said, it's not a problem with the applications coming in. It's a lot of it's either they're not qualifying, or the ones that we do get higher in are not coming through. We're still keeping steady in our numbers, and we're looking good with right now with the ones that are going through training, finishing through. We actually just started another class this morning.
Okay, very good. Anything further?
No, that's it, sir.
Thank you. Any questions of Michael? Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate keeping up to speed on those hires. That's critically important for us. Autumn, Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe I'll start by following up where Michael left off. In terms of the driver situation, we do have the driver situation is holding steady. While we're seeing a lot of trainees, we're not seeing the numbers increasing as we would like them to. What that means is, with the A-line support for Unitrans wrapping up this week, Thursday is the last day we'll be running the A-line, because it's the last week of it's finals week, so spring quarter is ending. So what that means is it is freeing up some drivers, and we are excited to hopefully launch the Route 42 increased service this fall. We're aiming to get that going ideally before the beginning of fall quarter. We have not yet set a date for that. And part of that is we want to be confident that we really will have the drivers to make that happen. It's not a one-to-one ratio. The number of drivers that we need for the A line is a little bit less than the number of drivers that we need for the Route 42. So we're crossing our fingers that that we're going to get there. And it's part of the reason I asked Michael to give a more in-depth report of some of the challenges that we're facing, to make sure that you all understand we're not out of the woods yet. But we've at least we are at least stable and not losing drivers. So that's the kind of situation with recruitment. On the Route 42 expansion, we are working on looking at making some improvements to the schedule that was approved last year. While that schedule was quite good in a lot of ways, it did create a situation where we would see that people traveling between Woodland and Davis would experience up to a 30-minute layover at key travel times, and that's at the County Fair Mall in Woodland. And we wanted to see if there was a way that we could reduce that, because the 42 is the only bus that goes between Davis and Woodland, and we wanted to have that be a better experience. So we're working on some options right now for that, and hope to bring a revised schedule to the board at the July board meeting for public hearing, that we then approve those changes to the schedule, so then we can again hopefully roll it out as quickly as possible, ideally before fall quarter starts in September. So that's the update on that. We're also working on making it possible for us to have more bikes on our buses by looking at ways that we can secure more bikes inside the buses using the wheelchair areas. We have 2 wheelchair areas on most buses and for most of our buses, and it's very rare that we actually are using both wheelchairs at once. And so that is a place where buses can be stored. So TransDev and YCTD are working together to figure out some equipment modifications that we could make, starting on the Proterras, our Causeway Connection buses, that would allow us to accommodate another 2 bikes inside the bus when the bike racks are full. And when we'll roll that out as soon as we have confidence that we've figured out the equipment piece, but we think there's hopefully a pretty low-tech solution. And then there would just need to be policies adopted by the board for liability concerns and all those things to make sure that we cross all the T's and dot the I's, but also hoping to be able to roll that out on the Causeway Connection again at the start of fall quarter. So that's what we're working towards. We'll keep you posted. Nothing is official at this time, but that's what we're working towards. A couple other things I wanted to note. The Citizens Advisory Committee met last week. As you heard from Mr. Hirsch, had a great discussion about the budget, unanimously voted to recommend to the board approval of the budget. So that's great news. Also got some good feedback from them on the Route 42 schedule, as well as continued their conversation about how the board and Citizens Advisory Committee can best be connected and engaged with one another. We also had a meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee today. That meeting was meant to happen a week before the board meeting, but since we moved the board meeting up by a week, they fell on the same day. But we did with them also talk about the Route 42 changes, give them an update on the Yahtzee project, which you're going to hear an update on from Brian tonight, and also talked about the budget with them. When we get to the budget item, we'll share a couple of the comments that we did hear from the TAC tonight, this afternoon, excuse me. And then finally, I just want to note that this is our second meeting that is technically a hybrid meeting, but we are all participating remotely. And so, given where we are, I think I'll be working with Hope, Mimi and I will be working with Hope over the next month to reassess what maybe we need to go back to fully remote meetings for the time being, to just avoid confusion for board members and the public. And with that, I will end my report, Mr. Chair, and happy to answer any questions.
Well, very good. Thank you. Any questions, colleagues? Very good report, Autumn. Thank you. It brings us to our main action item, or one of our main action items for this evening, which is our 22-23 budget action.
Yes, Mimi, if you would bring up the slides, and Leo's going to kick things off, and then I will jump in as well.
Thank you, Autumn. What I'd like to do here, since we had an overview of the budget in the May meeting, is to highlight in these slides the changes from the May budget, and then entertain any questions about any aspect of the budget. And these changes are based on the feedback that we heard from board members, members of the Citizens Advisory Committee, and others. And so here are really the key significant changes. the Woodland intracity routes now include 12 months of service versus 6 months in the May draft. The Route 42 had an error. The previous draft, hours and miles were really just the revenue hours and miles when passengers are on the 42. But in terms of budgeting purposes, we really need to budget for the full time the drivers are driving the buses, including the time to start revenue service and end it afterwards. So that added, we've now fixed that error so that the budget fully reflects the costs associated with the proposed schedule. And the funding for these changes, the combined changes were around 800,000, and it required increasing, in this case, in order not to make a change and a surprise to our member jurisdictions in drawing down more TDA and LTF funds, this budget would draw down more of our available federal CARES Act funding to support those extra costs from the earlier draft. The other sort of more technical changes, there were contingency allowances were actually in the draft budget for the fixed route, microtransit and paratransit, but they didn't have their own budget lines. They were within the transportation budget, and now we moved those into standalone lines in order to make the assumptions clear. And then there are, again, minor changes in the administration budget. And we also put in one project into the project budgets that was actually already underway by the City of Woodland. The actual disbursements are going to happen in the next fiscal year. So we want to make sure that was listed among the projects that the agency is doing. This is the bus stop improvements in Woodland. Okay, the next slide, please. So there are also changes in the budget resolution. There were some very good comments and suggestions from the board in May. And so here, there's a technical thing to just make clear what our enabling legislation talks about preliminary and final budgets. So we just wanted to clarify, this is actually a preliminary budget, but the board has in the past adopted it as final in June. And that's what the resolution as presented would do, is to adopt this budget as a final budget, rather than asking for another session coming back later in the year. There's also a minor change to the COLA, just for clarification purposes, to make sure it applies to all employees, including interns, and also should be effective on July 3rd rather than July 1st, just for administrative simplicity, since our pay periods, that's the start of one of our pay periods. There's an update to the reserve deposit, and to 335,000 because of the increase in the budget. It required an increase in the reserve deposit. As a couple of people noted, eagle eyes, sort of a test for those who actually read through the entire budget. There was an error in the narrative, where the narrative on page 45 of this packet, the narrative around the reserve deposit wasn't updated. So the narrative in the budget still said 112,000, but the table actually had the new number in the budget, and the proposed resolution has the correct 335. We would like to ask the board, either the sense of the board, or I don't know if we actually need to amend the resolution to say that we can fix any typos or errors in the budget as we publish the final budget, including that we would fix this narrative, this item in the narrative. The major change in the resolution has to do with the authority to move budget appropriation. Listening to the board the last time, this was narrowed so that it allows the director the ability to move between budget line items, but only within program budget. So in other words, within the administration budget, within the fixed route budget, but not between program budgets without coming back to the board, as would have been allowed by the earlier version. And it was brought up that there may be some items that may or may not be finally contracted this year from the current year's operating budget, or rather have been contracted but not necessarily paid out. And so this is standard in many other jurisdictions, that you have encumbrances that carry forward into the new fiscal year. We wanted to be clear that if we have some items that are contracted but not paid, where if we had that, we could carry forward the budget from this fiscal year into the next. But that only applies to things already contracted for out of the current year budget funds, but not yet paid out. So there's a discussion in the packet. We wanted to respond to some of the discussion about long-term financial planning and efficiency and quality metrics. And so this is not a change in the budget document itself, but we just wanted to acknowledge that we really hope to improve the usefulness and the policy discussion in the budget during the course of the next year, so that the next year's budget really includes both a discussion of the longer term financial planning after we finish a capital improvement plan and zero emission fleet plan, and do some further forecasting as to service and costs for the next 5 years. This is part of our work plan for the next year and will be incorporated into the next budget process. And as was suggested by one of our public commenters, and already, in fact, we have been talking about this internally, the value of having a public discussion of our quality metrics and our efficiency metrics, and to both address that and discuss it during the course of the next year and in next year's budget. And with that, that ends my presentation, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Leo. Colleagues, do any of you have questions you'd like to ask? I don't see any hands raised. I guess I have a question about maybe it's maybe it looks like Autumn has her hand up, so let's hear Autumn.
I did just want to note a couple of things that we heard from the Technical Advisory Committee meeting today. There was a few things that were kind of just additional, like I think one other typo that was caught. But the more substantial one has to do with from the City of Davis, with the Unitrans assistance that we have been carrying out for the last year. That was some funding that was some Davis CARES Act funding that was passed through to YCTD of about $830,000. We were not able to provide the level of service that was initially promised because of our own driver shortage. We provided about half of the service. And so we are in conversation with the City of Davis about what to do with the money that we have left and whether to give some of that back. I think and Leo can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's less an issue for this current budget. I think if we retained some of that money from the City of Davis, it would reduce some of the other CARES Act funding that we need to go after. It would be, but it wouldn't actually change anything in this budget because all of that was, sorry, I thought wearing a black shirt would make my cat more camouflage, but apparently not. Judging by your faces. So anyway, we have to work that out with the City of Davis. If we were to keep that money, the leftover money, it would decrease the amount of money we would need to go after from other sources. So that's I don't expect it will have huge implications for this budget, but it is something I just wanted to flag that's unresolved.
Okay. In that regard, the materials that we have before us indicate that there will be budget updates, I think 3 times during the course of the year. Am I reading that or recalling that correctly?
Yes, that's right. I mean, we decided to make that clear in the budget resolution that it sort of was accompanying the question of monitoring the status of the budget. And if there were changes in circumstances, we want to make sure that they're reported to the board regularly.
So a topic like the one that Autumn just mentioned, could be addressed in one of the budget update conversations, it seems.
Yes.
Okay. All right, that was one of the questions. There's another question that I have for you, Leo and Autumn, and that's one of the final pages in the budget document itself lists a number of funding sources where there are resources that are unallocated. I think they're unappropriated, if I'm understanding it correctly. So that's a very interesting page, and it shows that there are quite a few dollar amounts that this organization could tap as needed. during the course of the year for appropriate expenditures. In addition, we have a $4.3 million reserve at the 25% level. Is that the right number?
I believe
So we've got a pretty good, I think what I'm guessing, I'm asking, and I think you can kind of confirm that we're budgeting 23 million, but we have another 4.3 in general fund reserve or in general operating reserve. And then we have these other funds, CARES Act and other sources for purposes that have yet to be determined. Is that an accurate description of our situation?
Yeah, well, yes, I think actually the reserve would be closer to 4.5 million with this now larger budget, keeping it at the 25% level.
Okay.
And we did want to be very transparent about the other sources of money that we will be considering and factoring into the long-range financial planning and the capital plan. Because much of those funds can be used either for capital or operating. Some have restrictions, some don't. But we wanted to display that to the board.
Yeah, I think the transparency, I really appreciate that. That gives us all the opportunity to have meaningful conversations. Mr. Stalin? I'm sorry, Lou, go ahead.
Oh, just wanted to sort of follow up on a point that Autumn raised. The CARES Act funding in the budget was anticipated to be, was not anticipated to be Davis CARES Act, actually, that was Woodland UZA. If we did have some remaining Davis CARES Act money from what was allocated during the course of this year, then that would be additional funds that would be part of that total.
Okay. Director Staller, do you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you for the prepared for the budget. I look at it as a transitional budget as our organization is in the midst of morphing somewhat, and it's a good thing. And so I'm glad to see this presentation. The thing that always concerns me about the budget is to ensure that all sources of funds available to the agency are represented somewhere in the budget document. Is that the case with this budget, Leo?
There are other federal grant programs that the agency could apply for. So this is all the ones that have either been allocated to us already, so that we're aware of. And so part of our capital planning will also be to look at whether there are other additional grant funds available that we might be able to apply for.
Right. Well, I'm not expecting to have a presentation for prospective possibilities, but just want to make sure that everything that is presently available to us, there's no accounts sitting in reserve somewhere that are not reflected on this document.
No, I mean, we will let you know. There may be, as mentioned in the document, we may have additional savings this current year, which would add to our fund balance if we do. And we will share that in our updates to the board once we are able to close the books on the current year.
I do understand that. No more questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Very good. I don't see other board members with questions. Are there any, unless I'm mistaken, does anybody have a question before I ask for public comment? I see Jessie has found her cat, so now we're now we got it going now. All right. Is there any member of the public who'd like to address the board on the 22-23 budget?
We do not have any public comments.
Okay, very good. Are we, Autumn or Leo, do you have any closing comments, or are you ready for a motion? Okay.
I think the only closing comment would be that we did present this to the Citizens Advisory Committee, and I don't know, that didn't make it into our packet, but they did recommend, I think unanimously recommended board approval for the budget as well.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, as requested, I would move that we adopt this as our final budget with the understanding that there may be some technical corrections that are authorized for being made as long as they are non-substantive.
Very good. Is
Happy
there a
to second the motion. Thank you.
Very good. So we have a motion from Stallard and a second from Frericks, as stated. I just comment, I think Tom captured the thought. This is a very, very thorough budget. It gives us a lot of information. It's transparent, and I think it is a transitional budget too, so it's in which it should be in this transitional time that we are, not just our organization, but just all of the whole world is going through some changes. So it's good to have a budget that we can track to reality. So thank you both. All right, please call the roll.
Yolo County,
Aye.
City of Woodland,
Aye.
City of Davis,
Aye.
City of West Sacramento, absent. City of Winters.
Aye.
Okay, motion passed.
And I would just note that Director Ledesma, I think, would be very pleased to see the work plan, including the sustainability direction that you're looking at. So thank you for that. And that brings us to item 6, the 3, 6, 12-month goals. Thank you very much, Autumn, for putting this together for us.
Oh, my pleasure, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the support on the budget. So this next item is an update. If anybody remembers October of 2021, that was my second board meeting, and right after we had suspended the implementation of the Route 42 expansion. It was quite an adventure, but one of the things that we did and that I thought was quite valuable and really helpful for me is that we put together these 3, 6, and 12-month goals for the organization. And this was really kind of reflecting the fact that we did not have an approved work plan at that time that I was coming into. We had certain pieces of it, like implementation of Yolo Go, but I did not have a strong sense of kind of what overall we were working to achieve. So we did a bottom-up process with staff to put these goals together and then brought them to the board for feedback and approval. There were 11 overarching goals. And then 33 objectives and 3, 6, and 12-month milestones for each of those objectives. And so there's an example here. The overarching goal here is stabilize and strengthen transit operations and management. And then there was kind of 3 of these objectives beneath that: addressing the driver shortage, figuring out a set of criteria for prioritizing service, and restoring suspended services as our staffing resources allow. And then you see different milestones here for 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. And I've highlighted in green those areas, those things that have been achieved during that time. So this is just kind of giving you a flavor of what that document, or a refresher, I should say, on what that document looked like. Next slide. So of the 33 objectives, what I did is I went through and I ranked each of the 33 objectives based on whether or not it was behind schedule, whether there was satisfactory progress, and by satisfactory meaning that we've made some progress, we're achieving some key milestones but missing others. If we've made significant progress, we're meeting or exceeding our key milestones. And if it's complete, it means all of our objectives and milestones for the entire 12-month period have been completed. So of those, you can see 6 of the 33 objectives are behind schedule. 15, we've made satisfactory progress. 8, we've made significant progress, and 4 are complete. Next slide. So this gives you, so what I did then is I rolled up from all of the 33 objectives, I kind of rolled it up into each of the 11 overarching goals and tried to sort of summarize where we were. And you'll see that's in the staff report. And so these are our 11 goals. And as you can see, you know, we have not completed any of our 11 overarching goals, but we've made significant progress on 4 of them. And I'm not going to go through each of these in detail, so I'll just kind of highlight the areas where I think we've made significant progress and those areas where I think we've had some challenges. So, you know, I would say really thanks in large part to Leo's leadership. We've made great progress on updating our financial policies and procedures, and you all have seen that reflected in the board packets that have been coming forward before you for the last 6 months. We've made great progress on multimodal planning for transit, active transportation, and managed lanes. And I should note those areas, the ones that have an asterisk next to them, those are areas where, because the world has changed, we may not have met our original objectives, but I'm measuring progress against what our real world objectives are based on the fact that the world has changed. So for example, we did not yet, when we adopted these goals, we didn't yet know whether or not we'd won the RAISE grant. So the objectives we identified didn't include hiring Brian and putting together an RFP and all those things. So I've tried to measure progress against what's actually happened, as if it was different than what we put down on paper in October. So that's what the asterisks are about. And we've also made a lot of experience on improving our customer experience through updated tools. Our website being a huge one. The fact that we have a new website, we now have new newsletters and different tools that we now have for communicating with our customers in, I think, a much more effective way. And we've made a lot of progress on the staff team in terms of making sure everybody has a work plan, making sure everybody has an updated job description. We've clarified and updated our personnel policies to kind of make sure that they make sense and are current with best practice and transparent and accountable. So those are the areas where I think we've made the most progress. Where we're struggling, number 6, it's really the capital improvements piece. We have intended to update our capital improvement plan, have our zero emission fleet plan that's required by ARB, and make some time sensitive capital improvements. We're behind on all of those things. We have made a couple of the time sensitive capital improvement procurements, but we're actually behind on some pretty important ones. This is just an area where we have I think struggled to balance the day-to-day operational challenges that we're experiencing with the kind of longer term planning that we know is important. And so a number of these pieces like the capital improvement plan are part of the reason that we're not able to really effectively forecast our financial position, because we haven't gotten that done. So it's a top priority for me to get these capital plans completed. Part of the steps that we're taking for this, in order to get this done, is we are adding an additional staff person to the planning team. And that person is going to be a long-range transportation planner. So someone who is not dealing with the day-to-day operations right now. Everyone on our planning team is also dealing with operations. And it's just been very challenging for those folks to be able to take a breather from all the day-to-day stuff to focus on this. So having a dedicated staff person to focus on these long-range planning efforts, I think is really key. It's also going to be very important as we hire our new deputy director, that we make sure we have somebody who has strong transit planning experience, not just operating experience. And we've made that clear in the job description that you just approved as part of the consent calendar. So making sure that's another really important piece to making sure that we get this back on track. So that is the end of my presentation on this, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. There's obviously a lot more detail in the packet. Yeah, we're not adjourning, sorry. Disregard that last sign you saw.
11 overriding goals and 216 objectives. That's a pretty ambitious work plan.
So where did the 216
I made
come
that
from?
part up. Bunches of them, a family of them. Are there any questions, colleagues, on the presentation or on the materials in the packet? This is our first time we've seen this, and it's good. Tom?
Just a comment. I appreciate the clarity. I think this is I've never seen this kind of clear enunciation of we're there, we're not there, we're on the way. And it's nicely laid out. The colors were helpful. Thank you for that.
Agreed. Jesse, did you have a question? It looked like you.
I was debating on saying whether or not, or adding how inspiring it is to see that in black and white and other colors, to just see it laid out that way. And I think you could lead a class on that. I think that there's a lot of agencies that should operate exactly how we're operating under your leadership. So thank you.
Other questions or comments? And we do have one request for public comment, but before we turn to that, any other questions or comments? Matt?
Sure, Taylor, thank you. Yeah, I'd just chime in, Autumn. I think if you felt that this needed to be more of an iterative process and some things needed to roll off and were no longer important or no longer relevant, we, I think, know that through staff changes and just the dramatic changes in transit and that are happening, that you might roll some items off, add new items. And I don't think the board would view the plan as needing to be set in stone, but it's through regular updating and changing the objectives, it might be more of a tool for the agency. So I wanted to toss that out there.
If I may respond to that, because thank you. I realized one of the things I left out of my presentation was a discussion about next steps and thinking about, kind of where we go from here. And so, what I would like to get us to a place where we do have an annual work plan, ideally one that kind of also it tracks with the same timeline as the budget. So, because we kind of end up ultimately doing some work planning in order to do the budget. And you heard about some of that as we were talking about long-term sustainability during the last agenda item. So what I'd like to do is have that process kind of roll out a few months ahead of the budgeting process so that we can kind of make some progress in identifying kind of what are our goals, for the next fiscal year, and then use those to build the budget. And that's a best practice that many other organizations do. That I think it would be helpful for us to have that structure going forward. Because of when we did this in October and we adopt the budget in June, they're kind of out of cycle this year. But so I think going forward, I appreciate the feedback about kind of maybe having kind of a rolling update to this, with then the goal of kind of then doing a fresh look with a new work plan. I want to say like late fall into winter.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Lucas, do you have anything you'd like to mention? Okay, very good. Okay, I'm going to turn to public. I think before I turn to public, is this so this is an update. It's not an action item. We're not taking any action. I think there have been some good comments for you though. And we do have a public comment here from Mr. Hirsch.
Yes, we do have.
Alan, you want to go ahead and share with us? Maybe you can start our time clock.
Yes.
Thank you very much for letting me comment. I want to thank Jesse for hiring Marty Tuttle to find Autumn. We are so blessed to have such an amazing leader for this agency as we go through a kind of a rejuvenation. I'm really very impressed. Of course, I have some small little nits here. There's some articulation. We've lost the long-term plan, long-range plan for the agency, so for the board, so how the agency works with this thing. I think the Citizens Advisory Committees should have a long-range plan to it, should articulate, particularly around the customer experience in the bus stop program. And I think maybe adding the responsible manager for each one of these things. So if I have some ideas, I can send it directly to them versus going through the board here. But I'm very impressed. The transparency, this is my reaction as an outsider. I'm a part-time member of the Skeptics and Cynics Union. You all know that, right? But when I see a government agency with this much transparency and they fall short on something, said, oh, but look at all the other stuff they're doing. I know what's going on. I don't have a leg to stand on because I understand all the working parts here. So it kind of undercuts critics like me because you're doing so much. So kudos. We are so fortunate to have Autumn. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Alan. Appreciate your comment. All right, thank you, Autumn. I think we can move on.
Great, sounds good, Mr. Chair. So our next item is going to be Brian.
Thank you, Autumn. Not sure how I can follow that item, Autumn, with all those compliments, but well deserved. So I echo, Alan said, we're proud of what Autumn's doing. But thank you, Autumn and Chair Saylor and Board of Directors. Item before you today relates to the Yolo active transportation corridors, and I'm sort of toggling my working environments here. Hopefully you can see my slides. But really just kind of cutting to the chase, and I know we want to get out of here hopefully by our 8 o'clock timeline. So I'll try to go through my slides fairly quickly. But really what we're asking for from the board today is to adopt a resolution authorizing staff to release the RFQ that we've prepared and is included in the packet along with the staff report. The staff report incorrectly labels it as a informational discussion item. It's intended to be an action, so we will be requesting a motion and action from the board tonight. So I won't go too deep into the background because if you recall last month, I went through quite a bit of detail with this project and its purpose. So just to reiterate, last summer we received the RAISE grant for this project. At that time, it was called the Bicycle and Pedestrian Trail Network Planning Project. It's now called YCTD. And one of the key lenses through which we're looking at this project is to address barriers to mobility for low income and minority residents. I believe I showed you this flow chart, but just reorienting you to the big picture sort of schedule. We're right here in the project preparation phase, doing the preliminary outreach, and then we'll be launching the consultant selection process with your action this evening. Two main things that we've completed, which we hadn't fully completed as of the May meeting, which was wrapping up the interviews with local agency staff and also having focus group discussions with key stakeholder groups. With local agency staff, the focus there was to bring them up to speed and to discuss collaboration opportunities. With the focus groups, it was a little bit different. Most of those participants were coming in cold, were not aware of the project, so we had to introduce the project to them. And really, we were seeking their input into, into the process itself. What do they think a successful process would look like, and what types of outcomes would they hope for? And then, what input, advice do they have for us as we enter into that process? And those focus groups naturally sort of organize themselves into the four cohorts that you see there at the bottom. So I just wanted to highlight some of the things that we learned from both local agency staff and also the focus groups with whom we've spoken, really kind of with local agencies, it's really leveraging some past processes that relate to active transportation planning, such as the Woodland Davis Alternative Transportation Corridors. There's the great California Delta Trail, which kind of affects the southeastern part of our county, and also the Cache Creek Parkway plan. So really reemphasizing that this project isn't trying to replace other efforts, but to complement and sort of plug in some missing gaps so that we have a seamless network. Another thing to highlight is that we did learn that a lot of the unincorporated communities in Yolo County don't actually have a community plan themselves and don't have any sort of transportation vision or planning that's been completed for them. So we could potentially dive deeper into those unincorporated communities than we might have otherwise assumed as a result of these conversations. Also, thinking about how we might want to engage the YCTD try more on a government-to-government level than perhaps as a stakeholder, through the casino resort staff. So we'll look into those possibilities and engage them in ways that they want to be engaged and not make any assumptions there. So the focus groups were really rewarding for me. I got a much deeper understanding about the issues that the county faces from an active transportation standpoint. The community service and public health cohort was really focused on not just engaging the marginalized and under-resourced communities that we're trying to reach, but giving us ideas on how we can do that, how they can help us to do that. So it was really helpful for me and like I said, rewarding and encouraging that they want to help us and serve as kind of liaisons to some of the communities that we're trying to reach, rather than us trying to figure out how to do that on our own. Connecting the migrant housing centers with their everyday needs was also an important item that came up in our conversations. Transportation advocacy cohort really kind of focused on safety, distinctions between different types of bicyclists, and that the infrastructure should sort of kind of reflect that. And also that maybe we should consider expanding the vision of this long-range planning effort to extend beyond just infrastructure, but to be thinking about the programmatic level. How can we provide or or what opportunities are there to provide the demographics we're trying to reach with the actual equipment and the bicycling technology that would allow them to cover these, at fairly long distances that are take quite a bit of effort to do on a simply human powered bicycle. Environmental cohort group had some really helpful information, including references to other successful processes such as that in Napa Valley, connectivity between the secondary communities was important as well. They raised some really useful insight into potential funding opportunities that would work with projects we want to construct if they provide access to public lands. So parks, natural resources. So we'd be thinking about some of our route alignments potentially in terms of how we can connect people with the natural environment, and there might be funding there for us to do that. And finally, economic development group was really interested in taking advantage of bicycling as a year-round activity, being able to attract tourists who are typically higher income and like to spend money as visitors, and to leverage the beauty of Yolo County for agricultural tourism by way of this new network. So this map simply reflects what I've kind of visualized from all the conversations that I've had. I really felt compelled to just draw lines on paper and see how some of these puzzle pieces might fit. This is by no means even any sort of formal document. It's just putting pen to paper and just showing kind of what some of those higher priority connections might look like, how they look spatially, what those distances are that we might be trying to cover with a first with the first round of projects. So we can go back to that if you're interested later. From the RFQ standpoint, just wanted to reiterate that we're taking a one-step RFQ selection process. We want to hire a team and then work on a scope of work with them using the grant application scope of work as our sort of framework that we're starting from. And then we'll also be using the technical advisory committee members from the local agencies to help us in the evaluation and selection process. Finally, we hope that process will take just a couple of months, and we'll be able to bring a contract back to the board to execute in September. This just shows where we are in the process again. The intersection of these two yellow lines shows where we are now and what we have left to do and where we've come from. Most of this all relates to the RFQ process and consultant selection process. So that's the conclusion of my my presentation. Again, we're looking for your support by adopting a resolution to release the RFQ.
Thanks, Brian. I see, Tom, you've got your hand up.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. Two questions. First of all, I was intrigued by the wiggle in the Woodland Davis route you showed on that slide. There's a red line, and it's got a pretty dramatic place where you shoot west and then south and then east. Is that, or can you just give us a quick explanation for that?
Yeah, I mean, that also came up in in the TAC meeting we had this afternoon, and again, that line isn't a final route.
Understood.
It's simply me thinking about recognizing that the Woodland Davis connection is probably going to be one of our higher priority connections, and then also recognizing that there could be some challenges in trying to make a real direct route, say along the rail corridor, for example. That might be a lift that's too heavy for us for an initial project, and we want to try to stay within, say, the public right of way as much as possible. So that was the logic there, which is thinking about weighing the factors of speed versus cost, and right-of-way acquisitions and just several variables, just thinking about what might be a logical alignment. But the process is actually intended to think about what our final assumptions will be related to routing.
Thank you. I respect that. Although, we're going to live with it forever. Once we put it in place, it's going to be there. And I think people will be less inclined to use something where they see themselves going out of their way. So I hope we can work on a smoother alignment. So the second question I have, and that's my last question, is, are we fully aligned? SACOG recently released a trails plan. Will take us to 800 miles of trails throughout the region. And trails are just another word for active transportation corridors. So that's my question, Brian.
I've been had conversations with SACOG staff. They were one of the first people that I spoke with and asking, okay, so how does this project interface with the regional plan? The regional plan is really an accumulation of all the local plans, right? So they didn't, master plan a regional network. They took the planned facilities or desired facilities from each of the local agencies and then stitch them together. It's okay, this is kind of what we have. What we're hoping to do at the county-wide level is really look at it strategically and really focus on those intercity, connections so that we have, a seamless network and not a patchwork of facilities.
Thank you. It would be hypocritical for us not to be as closely coordinating as possible, seeing as how many of us on this board are involved in both organizations. So we appreciate that effort. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Other questions from board members? Lucas.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Brian, thank you for the presentation. Actually, less of a question about the sort of substance. I appreciate the work that's going into this. I would love to see, though, if possible or when possible, the actual PowerPoint slides, if it's possible. It's really, to Tom's most recent points in question, I saw, looking with interest at some of the different, we'll say, squiggles there, and would love to be able to see those a little bit more than just a 2-inch by 2-inch Zoom screen. So I would really appreciate the opportunity to take a closer look at the sort of the maps when they're available. Thank you.
Okay. Are there questions? I'm not seeing any. We have one public comment request, so we'll go to that before we take action.
We do have
Mr.
one
Hirsch,
public
go
comment.
ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Hirsch.
Thank you very much. This is wonderful work. Three comments. One is corridor between Davis and Woodland. Why don't use the, in British Columbia, they actually have bikeways along the freeways. Why can't we use the 113 corridor? We have lots of land there. We're separated there. Second, Vacaville's a healthcare center. We should have some access there. That's for people getting down there from Davis. And also, there are some routes where you cannot, I bicycle probably 90% of the roads in Yolo County. And there's some places I cannot get to, safely because there's not even a shoulder, like the casino and in Rio Vista, for example, you can't get there with any sort of, we should be doing just the basics. They're putting some shoulders on certain roads so you can get to certain places. You can bicycle, even someone who's a road biker like me can't even get there because it's unsafe. And again, I also want to make sure that the active transportation are useful modes and not just ribbon cutting roads. They are really destinations or real places that people want to go to. There's also an attempt to basically do things cheap and have ribbon cuttings along the right-of-ways that are easy versus things that are really useful to people. So I want to make sure that we focus on real useful corridors that people can use with these motorized bicycles, which are coming in a big way. If you've been to New York City, it's amazing how many bicycles are motorized. Thank you for this good work. We're moving in the right direction.
Thank you, Alan.
I'm happy to move the item. Thank you.
We have a motion to move forward with the RFP. Is there a second?
Stallard will second.
All right, so we have a motion from Frericks and a second from Stallard. Any further discussion? Okay, maybe please. Oh, yes, Jesse, excuse me.
Yeah, I debated on making this comment because I think it's probably really obvious, about the 505 overcrossing project from Winners, but it would be nice just to keep in touch with what's happening on that project as you align connectivity with Winners. That's all.
Great,
Thanks.
good comment. Okay, we'll go ahead and call the roll, please.
Yolo County,
Aye.
City of Woodland,
Aye.
City of Davis,
Aye.
City of West Sacramento is absent. City of Winters,
Aye.
motion passed.
Thank you very much. Autumn, I think we have exhausted the topics before us. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chair. I want to thank everyone for your attention to all these important items before you tonight.
Very meaty agenda, and our next meeting is July 11. So with that, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.